The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
Want to shake up your small business marketing? I mean, really shake it up.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Have you been thinking about doing your own podcast?
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Would you like to take your business to the next level?
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
This is the golden age of podcasting, and it's time to stop thinking and start doing.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Get your message heard 24/7, 365, over and over again.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Welcome to the Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Here's the creator and host of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, David Garofalo.
Welcome, everybody, to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is a 21-minute or less podcast to help you get your message out, grow your business, and build your bottom line. Let me help you bring your marketing and advertising into the 21st century. My name is David Garofalo. I've been doing podcasting since 2010, and I've created a six-figure income from just doing one of my podcasts. This is a 21-minute podcast or less, so let's start the clock. And here we go. Today's topic will be ideas for segments on your show. There are key segments to a podcast which are simple. They are the show opening, and that's maybe some music, the idea of the show, and the introduction of the host or hosts of the show, like you heard at the very beginning, right? That's segment number one. Then there's the setup of the episode. Who will be the guest, the introduction of the guest, or the topic that they're going to be discussing, which I went into of here's who my name, that I created a six-figure income from doing the podcast, and what the show is going to be about, which is the ideas for segments on your podcast. So that's the setup of the show. Then the main content of the show, which I'm into right now. It could be the interview or talking about the discussion of the topic that the meat of the show, right? We're in it, right? The main part of the show. Later on, I'm going to get to a little tease where I'm going to be going to break, and I'm going to tell you what's going to be coming up in the next segment after the break. And when we come back from that, it will be the continuation of the show. And then at the end of that will be the conclusion, the recap of the show, maybe a little recap of what we talked about, which should or may include the ask of the show, what we're asking you to do, which will be, in this case, come to Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, set up a meeting with me, and let me show you the studio so I can sell you onto the idea of doing your podcast here at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. That's the conclusion. And then the close, which will be some outro music. And at the conclusion, let me also add that you may want to put what's going to come up the next episode, right? The tease for the next episode to bring the person back.
Let me give you the producer's perspective on this.
Okay.
It really helps to have it broken up into segments, right? Because then I'm not guessing, what's he going to do next?
Right.
Do I need to mute this? Or, so it really helps to have a consistent format for the show.
And how simple it is that there's only, here there is 5 or 6 things, and This is what we're going to next. Now, we're going to go deep into, within those main segments, what are we going to end up doing? But there's the basis.
And what I always try to get the hosts to do is have a signature sign-off line, whatever it is.
Even if
it's see you next week, then I know they're done talking, so I'm not going to mute them while they're still talking.
Right. So those are the key segments, and there should be many more, but those are the key ones that you should end up having, or else you sound scattered, that you don't even know where you're going yourself, because frankly you don't know where you're going next. And if you have a producer, he doesn't know where you're going. If you're producing it yourself, you don't know where you're going, and you're bouncing all around. So there's key segments that are there. You should include a question and answer segment, answering emails and letters. That could be a segment within the main segment. Facebook follow-ups. Somebody messaged you on Facebook and you're following up on there. let them know where you got your questions, where your listeners are. You're letting the other people know where that is so they can actually chime in the same way.
Right, and it's great to give a shout out to the people who are providing you with show content.
They're going to like hearing it, and they'll do it again.
Yep.
And somebody else that didn't hear themselves will say, oh, maybe I should write in. You know, you're kind of allowing that, you're introducing that into your show. Verbal things that people say to you. That can be, if you're not getting letters in your new show yet, people aren't writing to you yet, somebody verbally says it to you, that's okay too. You scribble that down and you say, oh, somebody said to me the other day about my show, and this is what they said, and let me answer that. Most likely, if somebody's asking you a question about something you said in the show, there's another person that wants to know that answer, thought of it themselves too, just didn't ask the question, right?
Yep.
It's like when you're speaking in an auditorium of a group of people, and one person ends up asking a question, and you see people's head going up and down, or they wanted to say the same, they wanted to ask the same thing, or were wondering the same thing, because maybe you didn't make it so understandable that question was put there. So that's important. There can be a follow-up segment to the show where you're following up from a past episode of the show of what happened, of something you talked about. So if we talked about something during the show, and I mentioned to you we started a new podcast, and this week is going to be the first time it's going to be on. This following week that we're doing this show, maybe I give you a follow-up and say the new show came off and started off fantastic, or the guest didn't show up, like we brought to you that. We said we had a new show. Following week, the guest didn't show up and the show was canceled. Therefore, you have to do it. So these are follow-up segments of your show. Again, these are all in the main content of it. So in the main content of the show, you have segments broken up into there of answering emails or answering questions, and then follow-up of previous episodes. Did you know segments is a nice segment you can have. Information about the subject matter. These are facts that end up happening. Did you know that people that listen to podcasters, the majority of them dump off after 90 seconds? You know, we could have a little segment of the show every single week that would have a little factoid that would be put in there, and it would just break up the thing. Oh, it's time for the Did You Know segment, or whatever you wanted to call it. In the news segment, what is happening in the news of your industry, or the subject matter of your show. We did, in front of your own ears, a podcast we put together called The Snack Authority. And Ed does a little in the industry news. We're not even in the business at all, but he looks up something to get some industry news. And we got a couple of people that actually gave us 5-star reviews and stuff on there. And one person said, I love the
news.
Yeah, love the news. Somebody else said, I love the history segment of it. History segment, news segment. Yeah. And here it is, this little short 30-minute or less.
The podcast. Other big benefit that we're not even touching on here is it helps so much with show prep, right? Because I know now, okay, well, I need a news segment. And so I do that work, and then I do the history segment.
And nowadays with Google, let me tell you how simple it is.
It really is.
You click the news button and you put your subject matter in there and you get some industry news.
I've got, right in the document, my set of links where I go to get the news. So I just go to the document, click on it. Okay, this is interesting. Let's pull it in.
All these are easy. It's going to make your show flow better, and it's going to make your prep easier. It's a win-win situation as you go. Review segments. Reviews on new things that pertain to your show. In this case, we're going to do next week a show where we're going to review a new candy bar that's being launched because it's the Snack Authority. And we were talking about that this morning. How are we going to get a hold of one of these things? Because it's being launched on December 1st. We're going to have to find it. We're going to review it. It's going to be a little segment. And maybe we incorporate that segment all the time. On the Cigar Authority show, we do reviews on every single show of the cigar that we're smoking then. We have a certain time right before the break where we do a little review of it so far. We go to the next break so far. That review segment automatically happens each and every show all the time. Segments are great to have, and there's lots more. Segments on your show are a great go-to tool to push the show along. If you're interviewing somebody, you can just go along and say, oh, now we have to get to this. It's time for the next segment, right? So this subject we're talking about is going nowhere. I look down, look for the next segment. It's time to go to the next segment. Or it's time for the review of the week. Or it's time for the In the News segment. It's time for the question from the listeners. We just automatically go to it when it just feels like it's time. When it's time is when you run out of gas of that subject matter. You need to get to the segment is a reason to cut from somebody that's having a boring interview.
Yeah.
So you don't want to say to them, all right, this is going nowhere. You simply go to the segment, right? You need to get to the segment. And that's the reason to switch topics, especially a topic that's going nowhere. They are so helpful if there's no time sensitive, it can be skipped, right? If you have all these segment things that are there, if the interview is going great, you can skip it. It can be skipped. It's there in case you need it. If it's not time sensitive at all, you can use it for the next show. If it is time sensitive that you're going to end up talking about a new product that's coming out this week, you ended up skipping over it. You can actually change that segment next week to here's what just came out as opposed to here's what's coming out. If you end up skipping 3 weeks over and stuff, it's lost and gone, and that's it. But that's if you end up having a great interview that you say, I don't want to stop this. These things are not stop signs. They don't have to be done.
And even with, for example, the snack news, it's not, so timely like it's a huge breaking story. So if for some reason we didn't get to the segment, I have that for next week, and I can just keep adding to that.
And they're not wasteful. They're just little things there that are there for you, little tools in your tool chest, your podcast tool chest for you to use and make your show better as it's going there. I got a big tip for you. One that made me the most money for my podcast, that six-figure income that I get. I got that. If you want to make money with your podcast, and you should, segment for your podcast that include sponsors. I made them a lot easier, and I sold them a lot easier because I made them into segments, and they're going to work for you, and I'm going to tell you how I did that in just 1 minute.
If you're in the area of Boston North into Southern New Hampshire and you're thinking about doing a podcast, there is a place you have to see. It's called Studio 21 Podcast Café. Located right over the border into Salem, New Hampshire, Studio 21 Podcast Café is a live, working, full-service podcast and vodcast, that's video on demand, studio. All professional equipment, professional producer, and total distribution of your podcast is done for you. Would you like search engine optimization for more people to find your business or better ranking on Google? Well, Studio 21 Podcast Cafe can do it all for you for far less than you think. Schedule a free 21-minute, no-obligation consultation by going to www.studio21podcast.cafe. That's studio21podcast.cafe. Now, back to the program.
And we're back, and we're talking about ideas for segments on your podcast. You already know and understand the key segments for your podcast, the show open, the setup for the episodes, the main content, the tease to the break, the continuation of the show, which we're on right now. Then later we'll get to the conclusion, the wrap-up of the show, and the ask, which is important, the closeout of the show, the outro music, and you're done. You now know you should begin to add some segments that help the flow of the show, the segments that are great tools to move your show along if and when needed. You also understand that some are easy options like the review, the in the news, the questions and answers from the listeners. Those are easy. You probably have some good ideas already as you're listening to this, but while you're thinking about some ideas for your segment, first think about how to monetize them. How could you use those ideas to make money and do it now before you end up coming up with the segment? Who are you looking for the sponsor in the first place before you even come up with the segment? Who would the right sponsor be for this? What if you made it the right segment for them, almost a perfect fit just for them. A segment that was absolutely perfect for that company, a perfect match. Would you have a better chance to land that sponsor if it sounded perfect for them? Custom fit for that sponsor. Of course you would, and you will. You don't have a segment yet, so now is the perfect time to think of them first. Not think of you, think of them. The segment is going to be about them and be on your show. How about a segment where you read the inspirational quote of the week? You may or may not have anything to talk about yet for them, but explain what it means to you. Who would be the right person to get as a sponsor for the inspirational quote of the week? The inspirational quote of the week brought to you by Main Street Kitchens and Bath. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is to always try just one more time. That's from Thomas Edison, inventor of the light bulb, brought to you by Main Street Kitchens and Bath. Have you been there? You can find them at 123 Main Street at any town, any state. That will inspire you like they inspired me. I love my new kitchens and bath. Wait till you see what they can do for you. Something like that. Inspiration, kitchens and bath. How do you connect those things two together? Who is the person that you want to pitch? And then come up with the advertising at that point. Any company that thinks the word inspiration in them, a segment would be perfect for them, right? Anybody who is trying to aspire anybody into anything. Every week a different inspirational quote. There's a million of them out there with their same tagline. It's that simple. How about a segment where you go back in time? What happened this day in history? Back in time, time travel, this day in history. It's time to go back in time, brought to you by oldfashionedpennycandy.com. Oldfashionedpennycandy.com has all the nostalgic candy you can remember from back when you were a kid. Be a kid again and pick up an assortment of nostalgic penny candy from oldfashionedpennycandy.com. And today we go back in time to the year 1985. Live Aid concert was held in both Wembley Stadium, London, and the John F. Kennedy Stadium in Philadelphia, and raised over $70 million for the African relief. Then you may or may not talk about what you remembered about that event, and that would be it. But you just connected a segment with a candy store that I made up. They're actually, don't go to that website, there isn't one, I checked. Does that segment sound tailor-made for the nostalgia candy company that sells online? The answer was yes, right? We went back in time, go back in time to get those type of candies. And the Back in Time segment is brought to you by them, tailor-made for them. We actually do a Back in Time segment on the Cigar Authority podcast, the Classic Day in Classic History, brought to you by Classic Cigars.
Right.
It's the same segment, but it was tailor-made for a cigar company called Classic. So use these ideas to try to make a perfect segment for a perfect advertiser. Are there other companies that would love a segment on your show like that, tailor-made for them every single week? Sure there is. Just think about who they could be.
And, you know, I think another tip that you've shared before is if there's a company that you really want to pitch, spend a few minutes. Just record the segment so that they can see what it's going to be.
Right, and then you let them hear it. Hey, what do you think of this?
And it's done.
Make sure you put the name of their company in a few different times, not one and done.
Right.
You do it once in the middle, once in the front, once in the middle, once at the end of the segment. They want to hear it a few different times because they love the name of their company. Because you know why? It's their company.
Yep, and if you have a music bed with it, it just sounds professional.
And that's how you pick them off, one at a time, one at a time. Yep. You do the extra work for the client you don't have yet. Right? You end up trying to work the client, get them, and then you get them and you put the thing together and you give it to them and they're not happy with it. And they were happy with it right off the bat when you end up showing it to them before they were even the client.
Even if they say no, then you're gaining experience in how to put these together. Next time it doesn't take as long and
then
you're going to get better.
And go right to the batter's box at that point and say, okay, it didn't work for that person. How about this person, this person, this person? You have a little checklist of what it is, but I'm telling you, from a guy that's been doing it for a long time, I'm almost batting 1,000. Yep. If you put the thing together for them, they love to hear it, and you can almost bat 1,000. But I'm not batting 1,000 when it comes to just hitting somebody blindsided and say, hey, how about advertising on my show? I'm probably batting a 0
right
at that point. I have to do some upfront work. You have to do some upfront work. Don't think of some of your listeners might buy some candy from them because they support your show. Do you think that's going to happen? It is going to happen. You're doing an advertisement for this candy company. You're listening to my show, that they're supporting my show on it. Do you think some of my people are going to end up buying candy from that? I hope so, because I'll be asking them to do that. They support me. You like the show, and I'm going to support it back and forth, right? That's the way it's going to work. When creating a segment for your show, do it with your sponsor in mind. That's the way to do it. Every time, that's the way to look at it and think of it. If your show is new, it's going to be tough. Putting the cart ahead of the horse, selling the ads of a show that has no listeners, very tough. But a tailor-made ad will make it much easier. And that was the beginning of my success in podcasting. So there you have it right there, I'm telling you. If you've ever come up with a good segment, think of who it would be great for first. Better yet, figure out who that person is, that sponsor you're going to pitch, and then come out with a great segment. It's easier that way. Come out with a great segment for them. You have to get creative. It's fun to try to figure it out, and it's profitable. Here at Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, we got ideas, and we're here to help you because podcasting is what we do. It's a clean, professional podcast studio with state-of-the-art equipment, a professional engineer and producer here to make you sound good and look good. And a little coaching helps along the way, and we're here to do that for you too. Are you too busy to do it for yourself? We can help. We'd love to work with you. Contact me at dave@studio21podcast.cafe. That's dave@studio21podcast.cafe. Schedule a free 21-minute meeting with me. Let me show you the studios, and we'll talk about your thoughts, your plans, and I'll even buy you a cup of coffee. Next week, more stats. The month is over. We're going to have some stats. The show we did right in front of your own ears is still working, and it's working good, and it's getting better. We said we could do it again. We're doing it again, and you can do it too. That's my 21 minutes or less, and we're out of here. You've been listening to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, live from the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe on the United Podcast Network.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.